This story about the widow's mite is one that we all love very much because it shows the compassion of Jesus and his care for this poor widow and her reputation. And while it's well loved, I find it's also a parable. Well, it's not a parable, it's a real story. A story or a situation in the scriptures that is often misused by people. They use it to mean something that it's not meant for whatsoever. And specifically when we come to, people looking for donations to different things here and there, and, we give just $1 or $2 into the cause. And we say, well, hey, the widow's mite. Every little bit helps, so therefore, they should be grateful because that's $1 or $2 they didn't have beforehand, so it's more than they had. And fair enough, if you're dealing with something to which you have no moral obligation whatsoever. Let's say you got some kid who's trying to raise money to bring his baseball team to Cooperstown, and you just put $1 or $2 in the basket. Well, then you might say, well, that's $1 or $2 they didn't have before. They should be grateful. And fair enough. But that's not what the widow's mite was talking about. Jesus wasn't talking about giving money to people to whom we have no commitment. He was talking about our duty when we have something that we're meant to do. And putting money in the treasury was supporting the temple to make sure it was there for the people so that when they came to worship the Lord, the temple would be there, it would be clean, it would be built properly, it wouldn't be in disrepair. And it was, of course, the responsibility of all the people to help, to make sure they did their best to make sure it was there for them. So we cannot evoke the story of the widow's mite as an excuse for being cheap. So no, we should all be giving, obviously, when we have a commitment, as much as we can, even to the point of sacrifice. And the widow's mite, when the other people came in putting large amounts of money in, and Jesus saw the widow putting in just the 2 coins, he didn't say, well, every little bit helps, and so therefore, those 2 small coins are more than they had before, so the priest should be grateful. No, he pointed out that even though the other people were giving large sums of money, they were giving from their surplus income. Money they could live without. Maybe the interest on their interest. They were very wealthy people, and yet it was a lot, but it wasn't a sacrifice for them. It was just a little afterthought. Whereas this woman, in only giving 2 coins, gave her whole livelihood, everything she had to live on. And if anybody we could exempt from giving to the temple treasury, we might say this poor widow who had nothing, she could say, let the wealthier people give the money. I have nothing to live on. And we probably would have cut her a lot of slack and said, hey, okay, we understand that. But she gave everything she had into the collection. Imagine if the wealthy people had done the same, given everything they had to live on, how much more of a gift it would have been for them. Now, Jesus is not saying that we all have to give our entire livelihood, of course, into the collection. And the parallel with the temple is our own parish, supporting our parish to make sure that we're doing our job to make sure when we come to church on Sunday that the parish is here to meet your needs. This is where you come to worship, to have your babies baptized, to go to confession, communions, confirmations. This is where you have your weddings and your funerals and the places we come to pray before the Lord and be nourished in our faith. And so we all want our parish to be here for us, but of course we know that takes money. Everything costs money these days to do. And of course we need to all do our best and our part to try to make sure we're giving the best we can before the Lord. And some people do and some people don't. Actually, just this morning, I was talking at the Fellowship Cafe with a parishioner who says, I'm a greeter, and she says, Father, she says, I'm just amazed when I take up the collection how cheap so many people are, how little they put in the collection basket. And of course, that's something for all of us to look at individually and ask, are we doing our best before the Lord? If people truly are, if they're saying, hey, I can't give much, but even these couple of dollars I give is for me even a sacrifice, well, then that's the widow's mite. That's what we're talking about. That don't feel bad if your gift is not as big as other people can make, because for you, even that is a sacrifice. My experience, however, has often been that the people who are struggling the most to put food on the table are often even actually more generous than many of the people who are wealthier, who have plenty. So the challenge to us is to say, is my gift what it should be before the Lord? And of course, I guess the question to ask is, does the Lord care? Is he pleased or displeased whether or not we put money in the collection? And I think the answer would be yes. Just look at the scriptures for the examples we have of that. For example, one of the prophets talked about people who, when they came to offer a lamb. Now, the lamb you were supposed to offer for your sins in the temple was supposed to be a spotless, unblemished lamb, the best you had. And he said, and yet some of you are coming in and bringing not healthy animals, but blind lambs as your sacrifice to the Lord. And the prophet says, offer that to your governor and see if he'll accept that. And of course, nobody would. He said, well, if your governor would say, this is all you think of me, is a blind animal, you can't give me something better than that. If the governor would be offended, why do we think God wouldn't be? Why do we feel that we can slight God and not other people? Look also at the story of Cain and Abel. Now, the ancient biblical concept was of a tithe. The first 10%, the first fruits of what they raised, what they earned, whatever it was given to God. And the reason for that was to remind the person that what I have is not my own. It is God's gift to me. So therefore, I give the first fruits as an offering to God to thank him for the gift of the other that I have to use for myself. And they were, of course, supposed to do that. So Cain and Abel came and they offered their gifts before the Lord. Now, Cain was a farmer, Abel a shepherd. And Cain offered some crops. We don't hear much about it, but probably it sounds like, according to the story, that Cain gave some second-rate vegetables. You can imagine, for example, ears of corn that maybe didn't produce as many kernels as they could, tomatoes that didn't quite ripen, anything like that. And he offered them to the Lord, whereas Abel offered the best-born lamb of his entire flock, the finest he had. And God was pleased with that gift because Abel could have kept that lamb for himself, especially if it was a male and he knew how healthy it was. He could have raised it and used that to sire so many other healthy lambs that he could become very rich off that. And the wool that would come from that. Even if he wanted to have a meal, if he wanted to sacrifice it and eat it, he could have a great meal off that lamb. That lamb was very meaningful to him. It could have given him a lot. But he sacrificed it to God as a gift to him. And God realized from his gift, I see how much you love me because you gave me something valuable. Whereas Cain, he was displeased with his gift because it was stuff Cain was not going to use anyway. And the Lord was not pleased with that. Is that all I'm worth to you, Cain? Is a bunch of crops that you're never going to be able to use anyway? Is that all you think of me? This past week, on Wednesday, I was teaching the 5th grade, and we had the story of Cain and Abel. And I related it to something that hopefully they would understand based on things that could happen in their own lives. And I like to pick on kids to be the examples in the story. And, and there was, oh, Father, pick on me, pick on me. So I always pick on the kids who want to be chosen. I would never embarrass a child who would be embarrassed if I chose the person in my story. So kids had their hands up, oh, pick on me, pick on me. So I picked on 3 of them. This girl, Courtney, and then 2 boys, Andrew and Austin. And I said to them, okay, guys, let's look at it this way. Imagine it's Andrew's birthday, and he's having a party. And, of course, you were invited to the party, and when you go to the party, you bring Andrew a gift for his birthday. Now, Courtney asks right away, gee, what am I going to give Andrew for his birthday? And Courtney's birthday was just a week beforehand. And she, for her birthday from her parents, had received a brand new iPhone 16 Pro Max. And of course, the kids right away, when they hear that, like, ooh, wow, the iPhone Pro Max. And she said, I really would love to use this. This is such a good phone. But Andrew is such a great kid, and I care about him. I'm not going to keep this phone for myself. I'm going to give it to Andrew for his birthday. Now, what do you think Andrew right away is going to think of Courtney? And Andrew's eyes just bugged out of his head like, wow, look at this gift. And the kids are all like, ooh and ah, yeah, she must really like him or something like that. Well, those type things going on. Wow, that was a great gift. And Andrew's like, what do I do to deserve this beautiful gift? So again, then you have Austin. And Austin, too, recently got a brand new phone. But when he got his brand new phone, he kept it for himself, and it replaced an old Razor flip phone that his father had given him that was 15 years old, that wasn't a smartphone, had no internet, had no camera. All it was able to do was to send messages and receive phone calls, and very limited in what it could do, and the screen was cracked. And when you charged up the phone, the charge only lasted for an hour before you had to recharge it again. So it was basically worthless at this point. And he goes, well, I have this new phone. I don't know this one, so I'll just give that to Andrew for his birthday. And of course, the kids are all, growling and grumbling over that. And it's like, what do you think he's going to think? Andrew's going to think of this gift. Is that all you think of me, is to give me a broken phone that you don't need anymore? You couldn't even go to the store and spend a little money to buy me something brand new? That's all I'm worth to you? And so I said to the kids, can you see from that why Andrew would be so pleased with Courtney's gift? Because it was a sacrifice for her, something she could use and enjoy on her own, but she gave it to him, and Austin's gift was nothing. It just was worth absolutely nothing to him. I said, that's why God was pleased with Abel's gift, but not with Cain's. And of course, applying that to our own lives is to ask ourselves first, with the direct parallel from the gospel reading, is our supporting of our parish. Are we giving truly in a sacrificial way? Is the gift that we offer truly a proper gift back to God, the first fruits of what he's given us, so that we can say, Lord, I love you. I could keep this money for myself, but this is my gift to you in gratitude for the rest you've given me, and I'm giving it to the parish so that the parish will be able to be sustained and be here so I can come and meet you in church and have my spiritual needs met. Is that my proper gift back to God, or am I just giving a token gift? And of course, if we say that, I'm really doing my best, but my gift is small compared to somebody else's, that's where the widow's mite kicks in. Because if your gift is truly the best you can do, even though it doesn't look like much money if you open the envelope or whatever and see what's there, if it's truly a sacrifice, that's what Jesus was talking about. But sometimes we get in the habit of just throwing money in the collection without even thinking about it. A man I knew in one parish where I was assigned, a great guy, wonderful, wonderful man, but he was wealthy. And it was obvious he lived in a beautiful house, had a very expensive car, always dressed beautifully for mass, gold jewelry and all the rest. Nice guy. I don't know what he did for a living, but he was loaded. And one day he said to me, Father, $100 bills for me are like singles for you. I can just throw them around left, right, and not even miss them. Boy, I wish I had money like that, don't you? But he had that, and that's great, except every Sunday when the basket came around, he put only $5 in the collection. That would be like you and me putting a nickel in the collection. Would any of us, if the basket comes around, put a nickel in and say, I've done my job, my fair share to make sure my parish is here for me? Well, of course not. And so the challenge of the Lord asks us today is, are we doing our fair share? Is our gift, whatever the amount it is we're able to give, is it truly a sacrifice of money that we could say, I could see where I would spend this on myself and on my children, but I'm giving this to God as my gift to him in gratitude for the other money that I have I can spend on my family and on my children. But not just finances, that's one way we can talk about, but other ways where we need to apply the widow's mite to our lives. Probably with maybe the most precious commodity all of us have, and that is our time. Sometimes it seems the hardest thing for us to give anyone else is a bit of our time for something. Sometimes I've had situations where I've tried to get volunteers for a couple of hours on Saturday to do a project in the parish, and people will call and say, well, Father, can't I just give you some money to hire somebody? Because, I'm so busy with everything. A lot of times people would be very happy to give us money, but not their time. And so giving time to someone else, maybe a family member, a neighbor, a friend, somebody who calls you and says, I'm really in a bind. I'm behind on my work and this and that, and I really have a project that I've got to get done tomorrow. It's urgent, and I just need help. Can you help me? And even if it means sacrificing some time, if we happen to be perfectly free, great, that's wonderful. Hopefully we'd say yes. But suppose we did have other commitments or things, and yet we say, you know what, maybe I can change my plans. I'll do what I was going to do Saturday on Friday night, so that this way I can give you a couple of hours. to make a gift of time for someone, attention, even just a couple of minutes for somebody who maybe is going through a hard time and just needs someone to listen to them, just somebody to allow them to vent their frustrations or whatever it may be. The time that we give to other people, to give that is such a beautiful Christian thing to do for someone else. And there's a myriad of other ways we can apply the widow's mite to our lives, to making a sacrifice in whatever it may be, not, shooting back at someone with an "I told you so," when something doesn't work the way we told them it should, or so many different things like that. The challenge of the Lord today in pointing out the widow's mite was that she gave her everything she had as a sacrifice. And that's exactly what Jesus did for us. When he died on the cross, he had poured out everything. He gave his life for us as his body was on the cross. And the one thing we might say he still owned to himself was his body and blood. But even that, the night before he died, he'd given to us as food for us. So when Jesus died on the cross, he had poured out everything he had to give us. And that was his total gift of love. And now he tells us, love one another as I have loved you. In other words, be generous. Give of yourself sacrificially to everyone around you. And the more we can give of ourselves to others and to God, the greater riches we have before him. We find that greater joy, that understanding that we know from especially the prayer of St. Francis, it is in giving that we receive. And we will know the riches of God when we give whatever we have, even if it's not much, but give it generously with a cheerful heart to God, to one another's. Indeed, then we will be very rich in the eyes of God and in the eyes of others. May Jesus Christ be praised, now and forever.